All the
Or bad idea.
This is the time of the year when I start to gather more and new material, so my shop is beginning to get messy and jam-packed. So the only work I can do now is outside. And in this project, we'll discuss week updates, workbenches, Indiana limestone, and more. Listen as long as you'd like. Whether you clear finish all of your projects or if you paint everything, amateur or expert, there's something in this episode just for you. I tell stories, I make mistakes, and I cause people to laugh. So in this episode today, I'd like to discuss, obviously what happened this past week for me. I was able to get out in the shop, kind of, sort of. I was able to open the door and work outside a little bit. I continued working on my table. I was able to do some other things, like sand my table legs that I got. Work continues on that. Still debating on how I'm going to finish the table. Everyone's leaning towards, since it's a pine table, finishing it with a sealer, a sanding sealer, or a preconditioner, a stain preconditioner. I'm not sure what the difference is between the two, but obviously I need to do a little more research before I finish the table, and then putting an oil-based polyurethane on the top. And, it's my experience that watching people make bowls and cutting boards and other things is I always thought they used like a tung oil finish or like a spar varnish or something like that, but from all the research I've done online thus far, everyone's always finished their table with an oil-based polyurethane. So I guess I actually have some. I was able to find some from somebody because, gosh, oil-based polyurethane is expensive. And I was able to find some. Somebody was throwing out a bunch of paint on Craigslist, and they had some oil-based polyurethane. So I grabbed it. There's about 2/3 of the can left, so gas money versus money to buy that, definitely cheaper to go get it. So I guess I can start off with the table. I discussed it last week about how I found this junk table in the trash at an apartment complex. Had that 90s tile top on it. I've actually found a similar table. It was actually in the teacher workroom at school. Very similar, not the exact same design, but similar dimensions with the tile and the top and the legs and everything. And I was also able to find some 2x10s at a construction site where they were building a distribution center, factory, whatever it was, one of those big box buildings outside. They had these huge industrial shipping crates, got these 2x10s from, and I really don't have a place to store them, so I decided to go ahead and make a tabletop out of the ones that I got. A lot of them were junk, definitely very warped, and I have a 6-inch joiner that I never use, and so it was a lot of straightening by hand. So I was able to trim these down from, actually, originally they were like 20 feet long, and so I broke them up into 8-foot segments, got them back in the truck, and I decided to increase the original dimensions of this table that I found by 6 inches in each direction. And in doing that, I've actually kind of noticed that the table legs are a little thin for a big table. They're only about 3.5 inches in diameter at the thickest spots. And typically tables that are this size that I'm making are a little bit bigger. They're wider, they're thicker, but I think, regardless, these table legs are going to be able to stand up to the weight. It'll be interesting to see with this thick top, because I planed the top down before I glued up the pieces together to about 1 inch and 3/8. Then after planing it to get everything straight, about 1.25 inches. So I'm interested to see with this bigger table how it looks. I'm also going to make, I can't think of what they're called, but the frame that goes underneath the tabletop, I'm remaking because obviously I'm making the table thicker. It really would have been smart to make the table the same size, just because I could reuse that frame from underneath the table. Because I wanted to make it just a little bit bigger, I'm going to make a new frame, but I'm going to just use 2x4s, plane them down to probably about the same thickness, about 1.25 inches, and then just use those. So I don't know how the thickness is going to differ, because the thickness of the old frame of the table was only 3/4 of an inch. This is going to be twice that, about I guess a little under that, 1.25 inches. So it'll be interesting to see how those impact, or how that changes, how it looks, how it feels when you sit at it. The other thing is too is that I'm making this table. I got no place to put it, and I have no chairs for it. So I'm not a table guy. I think I discussed some disgust with people who make tables as their first woodworking project. The other thing too that people seem to think they have to make in order to be a woodworker is cutting boards. I don't need a cutting board. Wood cutting boards, they warp. You have to refinish them all the time. I mean, just buy one of those cheap silicone cutting boards from Walmart. They'll last way longer, and they're way more durable. You can wash them. I have never, ever needed a wood cutting board. Now, some of the designs that people make are cool. There's that guy in Russia. It's like MMT Wood or something like that. Makes these really cool cutting boards. That's his entire channel. I guess he knows a lot of people who need cutting boards. I really don't. I don't know anybody that needs a cutting board because I don't need one, and I don't know anybody else. So I don't need to make a cutting board because, like I've talked about, and kind of the theme of this podcast is that I like to solve problems with my woodworking, and that's one way that I do it is not by making cutting boards. That would be what I would call clutter if I made more cutting boards. I don't need one. So same thing with the table. Lots of people make tables. I don't need a table. I've always wanted a dining room table. I've always wanted to make one. But I don't. The dining room I have right now currently isn't used as a dining room. It's used as a place to put all of our junk room. And this table, I don't think it's going to be nice enough, especially because it's made out of pine. I don't think I'm going to need, or it's not going to be nice enough to use for a dining room table. I also don't have any chairs or anything. I think if I made a dining room table, it'd all be made out of hardwood, whether that's oak, ash, walnut, especially. I'd love to make something out of walnut. So I don't think this is going to be nice enough. I don't know where I'm going to put it. It's a little big. So the final dimensions are going to be about 64 by 42 and a half, I think, because the original dimensions were about 36 by 58 and a half. So we've kind of shifted those dimensions a little bit. I definitely think that there's no place to put this because it's so huge. You know, one of these things I've realized about furniture is that whenever you design a room, or like when my dad designed his shop, always design it with furniture in it because you have no idea how big furniture is until you actually get it in a room. Because like I saw this table in a dumpster, like this flimsy little thing, and then by the time I get it in the shop and set it next to some other things of comparable size, it actually started to look a lot bigger. And actually comparing it to my grandparents' huge dining room table, which I thought was huge, my table is actually going to be 4 inches wider and about 6 inches shorter. So kind of interesting how that turned out. I liked having the big space, and I was kind of tossing up the dimensions for this table, and obviously I haven't finished it yet, so I can change them. I can cut the table down, do whatever I want. But one of the things that motivated me to make this a little bigger is that I remember I went up to visit Purdue in the Honors College last week. It was on a Thursday. Not that matters, but it was on a Thursday. And so we go to this restaurant in the Honors College, like a little coffee shop, and there's this huge table. And these two girls are all spread out. They're studying. They got their books out, their papers out, their laptop out, and they're just going at it, and they're all spread out all over this huge table with huge table legs. Just kind of got me thinking about how thin my table legs are. But I thought, you know what? I would like to have a space like that to spread out. So I need some experience making large tabletops. And typically everything that I make, I don't make anything wider than what I can get through the planer. But just because I hate planing things by hand. I'm terrible at getting things flat or getting things square. So I always want to be able to get something through the planer. So my planer is, I don't know what the official title of it is, whether it's a 13-inch planer or a 12-inch planer or a 12.5-inch planer. I don't know, but I know I can get it just a little bit under, about 12.5 inches in there in terms of total planing capacity. Don't know what the actual term for that is, but so I don't make anything wider than that. Like my boxes that I make, I max out the dimensions. I've never ever made anything wider than that. So this is a first for me, and the other thing too is that this table is so wide, it's actually kind of hard to get in the middle with the hand plane. I'm actually using a drive plane, a joiner plane, and a block plane to clean this up. And actually, one of the things I'm most frustrated about with cleaning up this top is that you have the glue squeeze out. And I know a lot of people before they actually glue something up will spread the glue out evenly. So that way they can avoid glue squeeze out, and they can. It is a more solid glue joint. But when I glued it up, I don't, glue is glue. It's stronger than wood. I really don't care. So I put all the glue on. I let it all squeeze out. The other thing is too is that these dowels are so exact that if you put glue in the dowel holes, it'll actually cause the wood to split no matter where you put it. So I always put in my dowels dry. They're just there for additional strength. Occasionally, I'll drill the holes a little deeper. This is what I do with this table. So that way I can get glue underneath the dowel on both sides, and if the hole's not deep enough, it still will split the wood. And I had that happen in a couple places, but it's not a huge deal since those edges are hidden because they're glue joints. But anyway, I had all this glue squeeze out all over the front side of the table because I glued it up. I glued it up with the top down, so all of this glue ran dripped out of the bottom. I have all these glue drips all over the board, and usually when I need to clean something up that has glue squeeze out on it after it's dry, I run it through the planer, and that typically cleans it up like nothing. Cleans it up like butter, gets it all off, nice clean surface. Except for all of the nicks and knacks that I have in the knives, kind of my own fault. A lot of battle scars there on that joiner and the planer. But I run over with the plane, and I had the hardest time trying to get the freaking glue squeeze out off because the plane would just go up and over, and when it went up and over, it wouldn't catch the glue squeeze out. So I had to really raise the blade on a block plane, just go over it gently. I tried to use the belt sander to get some off, and actually, surprisingly, of all the tools my dad has, he does not have a belt sander. So I got a belt sander from my granddad's shop, and I've never used a belt sander, and it's definitely a learning experience. I always use a palm sander, or I sand by hand. I never had a purpose to use a belt sander, but I tried it, and it's incredibly hard to keep flat. That's the issue I've ran into. Is that especially I looked at it in the glare or at the tabletop in the glare, and you can see just how you can see where I put pressure points on the belt. It caused a lot of issues there. I just couldn't keep it flat. And that kind of drove me insane, especially as I tried to get this glue off. I had a couple areas where, especially when I put a dowel in through an area where there was a knot, I had the issue where the knot kind of split and raised, and so I had to clean it up, and I tried to sand it and ended up creating more issues. That, and it would lean one direction or the other and create like a ridge or a groove in the top. So I was able to finally get all the glue off with the block plane and a chisel, and then I was able to finally clean it up. However, I glued up fairly straight. I was kind of surprised because these dowels are fairly exact because they had a doweling jig, but I was still surprised how when I glued it up, how the boards, because they're naturally warped, how they still raised up a little bit. So probably I think the highest board or the highest differential was like a 16th of an inch. So I had a board stick up a 16th of an inch on one side, and on the other side it was underset, or it fell in about a 16th of an inch, for lack of a better term. But that was kind of frustrating. I was able to clean it up, but the other thing is too is that because of the way the clamps were, is that the board's kind of cupped. The top is warped, so to speak. So another issue that I'm having is that, well, it's warped, but do I try to take the plane and plane it off? Do I try to plane it flat and take the time to do that, or do I just see what it looks like when I put a straight edge against it and I screw it to it and see if that'll make it straight? So when I put the frame on or the skirt on underneath the top, will that straighten it out? I don't know. So that's something I was going to do. I wanted to get the tabletop to the point where I could fill it with wood filler, because there was a lot of holes. You talk about all the knots that came out, all of the nail holes from when it was a part of this huge freezer frame thing. All the other nicks and knacks that are on the board, especially I wasn't using a block when I was hammering it apart, so there's huge hammer dents in it. A lot of places that need to be filled. I was hoping to do that last night, actually, when I was working on it, but because I don't know what it's going to look like when I screw a straight edge against it, I don't want to mess with it until then. So I'm going to make that skirt or apron or frame today. Hopefully it looks good. Hopefully it's straight. Hopefully it accomplishes what I want it to, because I really don't want to have to take the time to sand out or plane off the top so it's absolutely flat. The other thing I'm kind of worried about too is that typically, These mass-produced tables that are particle board or plywood are very, very flat, very level. The tables are very square. They're very plumb, very excellently made. So I'm kind of wondering with this table if that's going to happen, because typically you can stand a marble or a dime on a table and it won't go anywhere. But I'm afraid that after I finish this table, it's going to have low spots. Especially if I were to make a mess, say I was going to spill my glass on the table, which I won't. But say that were to happen, it's all going to flow and make different puddles on the table, and that's actually what I'm kind of worried about. But I'm sure that's being nitpicky. The other thing is too is that when I stain it and say that there's these uneven spots, then all the stain's going to flow to one area, and I don't, regardless of whether I use a conditioner or a sanding sealer or not, it's going to puddle up, and it's going to be darker in certain spots over others. Same thing with the urethane stain. Actually, I've never used an oil-based polyurethane before, so I tested it out last night, and it's actually really thick. It's like honey. I'm very excited. I'm kind of, different people have done different methods because, it's, in my opinion, it's not worth cleaning out a brush after doing a coat of oil-based polyurethane. So some people use a brush, some people use a rag. Not actually seen many people use foam brushes. I typically clear finish a lot of my projects with a water-based polyurethane, and I always use a wire brush. A foam brush. But one of my frustrations is with that, especially as the foam brush ages, it starts to fall apart and you get all the little particles of foam on your project. But a couple scrapes with the card scraper, cabinet scraper, whatever you want to call it, that typically takes those out. So I'm still debating how I'm going to do this. Definitely going to use the card scraper to get a nice surface, sand it, all that good stuff, round the edges, round the corners. It'll be a great table. But something else to me that happened this week is that I was working at the radio station. The boss there asked if I could do him a personal favor. I mean, it wasn't for the station. I'm doing an internship there, so he always likes to check with me if I can do something for him if it's not for the station. And I said sure, and so he asked me, and we went along. We went in his truck and we went to go pick up a workbench. He's like every older guy, likes to work on cars and do all that fun stuff. I think he has a 1955 Chevy. I wish I knew what car it was. I've actually never seen it. I just know it's a Chevy, and it's from sometime in the 50s. But he's working on it. He wants to, I don't know, redo it or something, I guess, rebuild it. I don't know what shape it's in, so I can't tell you what exactly he's going to do to it. But he doesn't have a whole lot of tools, doesn't really have a workbench. He's got a garage, but he doesn't really have anything else. So we went to go pick up this workbench from this guy named Rick Bolt, lives in Brownsburg. Never met him before, but I know you guys don't follow local Brownsburg politics, but Brownsburg's getting this new downtown district, sort of. So where Arbuckle Park is and the Little League baseball fields and a bunch of these other houses, it's all getting torn down, which is really sad. And they're going to put in office space, a town center, which is like shops and offices, another office space. And eventually they're going to put in a rec center, which is all kind of exciting. Kind of beyond me, but still very exciting to have. But it's really sad, though, because the Little League fields have been played every season for Little League baseball since 1955, I think, either 1955 or 1951. And Brownsburg actually has a Little League team that went to the Little League World Series, played on that field, has 3 Major League Baseball players in Drew Storen, Lance Lynn, and Tucker Barnhart, who all played on that Little League field. It's really sad to see what I think is a part of Brownsburg history be torn away. But what's even more sad, is that this guy, Rick Bolt, he bought all of these properties along 267 on the, I guess, in the middle of town, north side of town, actually, to build this town center. And that was something he wanted to do. He's wanted to do it for a long time. He made the proposal to the town, and the town said, yes, let's do it. They kind of screwed him over a little bit just because they wanted him to get all of his properties, which he's been using as rental properties, abandoned so they could start construction on this project. But it's been a year, and he's lost all the income on these properties, but he's still paying income taxes, and they've given him citations for mowing his lawn and keeping his properties up to snuff, which to me, that's kind of, I don't know, I would be very irritated if I was him. But I knew there was someone behind this town center project. I just didn't know it was him. And so I had a great talk with him when we went to go pick up this workbench, and it was really cool to hear about because this is a guy that knows everything about the history of the town of Brownsburg, and it was really cool to talk to him a little bit. I mean, it was very brief, but I still learned a lot. Anyway, what was really cool about this workbench is that it's a plywood top, 2x4 frame. It's fairly light. I think it's fairly well built. Very sturdy for sturdiness to weight ratio. It's not a very heavy bench. It's kind of like desk height. It's meant to be sit down at. Actually, his wife was a dentist, and this is coming from a dental office. So I guess this used to be where she did dental work. I'm not really sure exactly what she did, but it was really cool because there's this overhead light, which I really like to have at my desk because I don't have one. But I know those circumstances where having an overhead light would be awesome or come in handy. Also has like a little pegboard on the back, which is really cool. I really like the light thing, though. I think I might do that to some of my benches or tables. Just put a light right over the bench, or on a low, because I have lights that are like over my bench, but they're on the ceiling, and so sometimes my shadow or the shadow of the shelf gets in the way. And so I'd actually like to have something like that for my benches at some point. Maybe when I get my wall-to-wall workbench in my shop, that'll happen. I don't know. I'll have to think about it. But I found some really other cool things in his basement because this guy has like 12 or 13 rental properties. And what's really sad is that all these properties are going to be torn down. The furniture's inside of them, all the original fixtures, all that crap is in there. The scrappers, the looters, all the criminals haven't got to it yet. Which, if it were me in another life, I would take all that stuff and do something with it. But, as you know, I'm an 18-year-old senior in high school, and I really can't do anything with all that crap. But I took some pictures of some of the things I found in his basement. One, I guess, is like a dental grinder. I don't really know what it is. I posted a picture on the Breece Woodworking Instagram page to try to figure out. Had a couple guys comment. Actually, one of the guys actually said it was a dental grinder, but I don't understand. What do you need a tool to grind teeth for? In order to be able to get teeth on this grinder, they already have to be out of the person's mouth. So, is it like for fillings? Is it for crowns? I don't know. But the other thing that was really cool, he had some white oak slabs, had this huge desk, and this gigantic drafting table, which, if it was still applicable to today, would be really awesome to have. But he also had this, what appeared to be an oak stationery. I posted a picture on Instagram also to figure out what this item was. Had a lot of good feedback. Had a lot of people send me pictures of their stationery or the stationery in their store or whatever. And it was really cool to see kind of how the community came together to help me out and figure this out. But it's not actually mine. I had a lot of people telling me I should fix it up and use it for something, but it's not actually mine. It was this guy's, Rick Bolt's. What's really sad is that the curved glass door on it's missing. The drawers that are underneath the desk part are missing. But a lot of the details, a lot of the craftsmanship is still there, which is really awesome. Which he's trying to get rid of all of his stuff. So I wish I could take up some of that stuff, but I don't really have a place for it. That I got enough projects in my shop right now anyway. That's one of the things I've talked about 1,000 times in this podcast, that when my dad built the shop, he did not build it with storage in mind because there was no place to store anything in there. Wood, supplies, hardware, projects, it's all going to be left out on the workbench. There's there's not a whole lot of shelving or cabinets or anything. So I also want to tell a story that happened to me a little while ago. I'm interested in radio. I'm not going to study radio, but I'm going to work at the radio station up at Purdue in the fall. So that'll be awesome. Kind of an extension of what I'm doing now. So I shadowed this guy named Abdul Hakim Shabazz from WIBC in Indianapolis, and we went down to the Statehouse. I got to go to some of the press conferences, which was cool. It was awesome to see kind of how the press works, and I got to meet a lot of the members of the press corps from throughout the state who are Statehouse correspondents and whatnot, which is really cool. But if you've ever been to the Indiana Statehouse, there's all this character, all of this craftsmanship into this building. It's gorgeous. And I did a little bit of research on it. It's actually Indiana's 5th state house, believe it or not, but they're also including the one that was originally in Corydon. So the state capital of Indiana used to be in Corydon, Indiana. It was too far south, so they moved it to Indy in 1824. And then they built a couple state houses since. A lot of the earlier state houses were inspired by the Greek Revival architecture, but just the building techniques of the times in the early 1800s weren't enough to make these buildings last. But after they had one building that where the ceiling collapsed, and it had a lot of other structural issues, the governor at that time decided to commission a team to develop this state-of-the-art excellently built Statehouse, which is the current one we have today, which was originally broke ground in 1880 and was finished in 1888. And it's beautiful. And what's actually really surprising is that although electricity wasn't mainstream in the 1880s, in fact, I don't think people really started installing electricity until early 20th century. But this State House was actually wired with electricity, which is really cool because if you go in there, you don't see like you typically in older buildings, you don't see the metal pipe that houses all the electricity and everything that runs through the ceiling and along the walls and whatnot. But this building was originally wired with electricity, so it was really able to kind of modernize it for the 20th century. But it wasn't until the 1980s when they went through like a 100th anniversary renovation that they actually put in some of the they remade some of the classic chandeliers. They cleaned and polished all the limestone in the building. And all of the marble floors. And that's kind of something else too, is that all these modern buildings now, all these brand new buildings, they're made out of steel and glass. And like we saw with the Trade Center, with the World Trade Centers, when they went down, I mean, one bad fire and the buildings were gone. And actually, if you've ever watched one of those like modern marvels, where will the world be in 100 years, or what would happen if humans left Earth? If you ever watched any of those videos, they always go to New York City and say what buildings are going to fall, what buildings are going to be the last one standing, and it's not the Freedom Tower that's going to be the last building standing. It's not some of those other big buildings, Chrysler Building, not any of those other buildings. It's actually Rockefeller Center and the Empire State Building will be the two last buildings standing in New York City, because they're built out of steel and concrete. And those buildings are built to last. And the other thing is, too, is that they're not surrounded by all of this glass like all the modern buildings are. And I don't know if that's just a style thing or maybe it's cheaper to do it that way. Well, it probably is. I think glass is cheaper than concrete. I don't know. You have to quote me on that. But, all this modern construction, all these buildings are going to be torn down eventually because they're not built to last. It's interesting, some of these huge skyscrapers that we're making out of this glass, where are they going to be in 100 years? Because, we look back now, and all of the buildings that we cherish, all of the historic buildings that we make historic sites are all made out of brick, stone, concrete, limestone. And so buildings like the State House are going to last forever. Now, obviously, the Indiana legislature has outgrown the State House, and they've kind of molded into other buildings around Indianapolis. But the State House is one of those buildings that's going to last forever just because of the materials it's made out of. And I constantly think about that with my projects. It's like, with wood, the project's not going to last forever. I mean, say you leave it outside or it gets burned in a house fire. But, I think about that all the time. But, I kind of had this reality within myself that, my projects, woodworking projects, furniture isn't supposed to last forever. One of the things I love about wood is that it's the most renewable resource. I think we're going to see this huge resurgence of going back to wood just because of how environmentally friendly it is. People don't think that because you grow the tree, you cut down the tree, use it for wood. But the reason it's environmentally friendly is because it's reusable, because it decomposes, because you're using wood to make furniture. It's not being burned to make fuel and releasing toxins into the atmosphere. And a lot of the times, this is a huge misconception. People think that going paperless is more environmentally friendly, when actually it's the opposite. More paper makes a more environmentally friendly society, because paper comes from trees. You grow the trees, you cut down the tree, you make the paper. But forests that are used for paper are cut down and regrown. Other forests are cut down and used for livestock, agriculture, development, fuel. And those processes release more toxins into the atmosphere than just cutting down the tree and using it for paper wood. And a lot of times these paper companies that make paper will regrow the forest, like I said. So really, as we go to a more paperless society, we might actually be doing more harm for the world, which is why I really support woodworking, and I really hope that more people are encouraged to get into woodworking instead of all this, consumerism mindset. That kind of what drives me insane is that we've become such a consumeristic culture. And you go back 100 years, you didn't have the department stores, you didn't have the online stores, you didn't have all this crap. Because here's the bottom line: Amazon, Walmart, Target, whatever. Besides the grocery section, all of what they sell is crap. And even the majority of the grocery section, that's why so many people are overweight now, is that we make all this food that people don't need. We've gone away from a needs-based society to a wants-based society. Where now instead of buying things we need, we buy things we want. And a lot of times the things we want are junk food. Impulse buys. Why do you think they put all the candy in the magazines by the cash register? All this stuff is junk. And woodworking kind of takes us back to that step. Is like, if you need something, you make it. You solve your own problem. You don't need to buy it. You don't need to buy all this junk from furniture stores or, buy all this crap from Walmart. All these impulse buys, special organizers, containers, clothes, products, cleaning products, all this other crap. There's a couple products out there that will do everything for you. And you have to get away from this consumerism mindset. You don't need that t-shirt. You don't need that snow globe. You don't need all the holiday decorations. All this advertising has made you believe and made you think that you need all these things. And there's so many people out there that are so caught up in marketing schemes, marketing ad campaigns. People are so caught up in it, and they forget about what they actually need, and they succumb to the advertising. That's why advertising is really what makes or break a lot of these big corporations like Walmart and McDonald's and Coke and all these other big companies. The reason that the only way they can make themselves more successful and more profitable is by increasing their advertising budget. That's allowed them to do research, to do studies on how they can manipulate people's minds to believe that they need their product when you really have never, ever in your life needed a Coke. Now, in reality, Coke is very good. I enjoy Coke. I actually don't drink Coke, but I do enjoy drinking pop or soda or whatever. So I do drink it, but I don't need it. And one of the things I want to be when I grow up, especially as I've talked about before, I'm a minimalist, is that I want to eliminate things that I don't need. I don't want to succumb to this culture of consumerism, and I hope I can teach my kids that. I think also as a society, we're going to kind of go in reverse. We've kind of evolved into this consumeristic culture, but I think now we're going to take a step back. Because if you ever watch one of those futuristic movies, they're always very simple. You don't see the big flashy products or everyone's wearing the same clothes, so obviously no one buys clothes in the future. I don't think we're going to have the level of consumerism and big corporations in the future as we do now. I don't think so. I think we're going to step back into supporting small businesses, and then from small businesses to doing things for ourselves, to kind of living in these communities like villages used to, or like Indian tribes. Different people in the tribe would do different things, because that's the other thing about consumer culture, and even with social media and technology now, is that people have spread farther apart. We've made these things that are designed to bring us closer together, but no one needs to rely on anybody anymore. People don't understand how reliant they are on the economy and how reliant the economy is on different things. But besides that, and even with social media, we found a way to connect with getting us farther apart. And we've gotten away from having to rely on each other. So, because we don't need someone to wash our clothes, we don't need someone to make food for us because we can do it ourselves, because we can buy a frozen dinner for ourselves, because we have all the cleaning products, all the tools, we can build our own homes, we can hire someone to build our own homes, we can buy all these products for ourselves. We don't rely on anybody, which means we're not connecting with anybody. We kind of lost sight of, the neighborhood mindset. I'll admit, I don't talk to many of my neighbors. I talk to the gal across the street, the gals next to me, George, my next door neighbor, a couple guys down the street. But like around the corner, I don't really talk to anybody because I don't need to know them. It's very isolationist, and humans are very, very social animals. And because we've been able to solve so many problems to where individuals can do things for themselves. I'm not talking about woodworking. I'm talking about consumerism and how we need food. We can buy food for ourselves. We don't need to grow our own food. We can do it. We can pay people to do things for us. We don't need to rely on other people to help us out. And to me, that's how great relationships are formed, is by believe it or not, asking someone to help you or helping someone. Those are how the greatest relationships are formed. Not the, hey, you want to go get a beer, or let's go get a coffee, or let's go to Starbucks, let's go out to eat. Because relying on people and being a service to others are probably two of the things that create the most solid relationships. So whether you work in an office or whether you have friends, a family member, if you want to repair a relationship, a friendship, a coworkership, then help someone. Be of service to someone. Help them out. Lend them a hand. Offer to do something for them. Give them help in their garden. Help them mow their lawn when they're gone. Talk to them. Make a meal for them. Make them a brownie. Make them a cobbler. Be neighborly, and that's what neighbors do, is they help each other out. So we've kind of strayed from the story I wanted to tell you to this whole consumerist thing. But going back to the Statehouse thing. The other thing about the Statehouse, besides all the beautiful craftsmanship and architecture, is the stained glass windows that are in there, all of the marble sculptures and everything. But back to my job shadow with Abdul, is that we go to the House of Representatives, and this is, I think, the second time that we've been there. We initially had a press conference with the Senator Pro Temp David Long. Then we went to the minority leader press conference, and then we went back to the House for a press conference at the end of session with Brian Bosma, who was the Speaker of the House, and we had it was like a little press conference. It's right at the front of the House of Representatives. It's all very tight, so we're all kind of jam packed. All the reporters, shoulder to shoulder, with their mics right in his face. Or with actually surprisingly, a lot of reporters use their phone. They record everything with their phone or they videotape it with their iPad or whatever, and they're all just they're all getting right up in his face, and we're all standing. They're all very tight. There's probably 20 of us there. There's very little space at the front of the House of Representatives, interviewing Brian Bosma, and I thought, well, it'd be cool to get a picture with Brian Bosma, and I was wanting to do so before I left, but I didn't, so it's a well. But, the press conference is over, and we're all walking away, and I'm following Abdul out of the place, and, I'm facing towards the door. So I'm walking towards the back, Abdul's in front of me, and we're walking past, I guess, the front desk or whatever at the front of the House of Representatives, and, we're getting ready to leave, and I hear this voice behind me, and, Brian Bosma is this huge guy. I don't know. He's got to be like 6'6", maybe maybe like 6'4", 6'5". Huge guy. No hair. I won't say the B word, but he has no hair. And so I hear this voice behind me. I had just gotten my hair cut because my hair is way too long. I got my hair cut like 2 days ago. Usually I get it 0 on the side, scissor cut on the top. So it's a very short military style haircut. And I hear this big, deep, burly voice say, "Man, I need a haircut like that." And I turn around, and it's Brian Bosma. And, he's not a big celebrity, but in my opinion, he's a local celebrity. He's a big deal. I never met him before, and he made that comment to me. To me, meeting politicians are like my Justin Bieber concert. So whenever I meet a politician, I just go nuts or scream like a little girl, like I would if I was going to a Justin Bieber concert and I was, a 13-year-old girl. So I turn around and I'm sitting there like, what the hell do I say to that? I stare at him for a second and I say, well, I'm a youth. I get my hair cut as often as I can. Which, of course, it's opposite of what most youths do, but I couldn't think of anything to say to the guy. I mean, why would you ever go up behind some random stranger and say, "Man, I need a haircut like that"? I don't know. It's one of those stories I'm going to carry with me for forever, but then Abdul introduces me to him, and it's just kind of an awkward thing. It's like I'm so frozen in my mind. I'm just giving him the big eyes and the wide open mouth. Like, I don't know what to say to him anymore. So Abdul introduces him to me. We shake hands, and we walk out, and it's all okay. It's only been about a month. But I'm sure I'll see him again. But in the House of Representatives, so this is above the front, there's this painting at the top of the House of Representatives in the Indiana Statehouse that's called The Spirit of Indiana. It was painted in 1961. I guess the painting started in 1961. It was finished in 1964. That was when the painting was installed. I personally hate the painting because it was, you have to imagine, it was painted in the 60s, all these hippie designs and all those bright colors. It's not like a very traditional painting, which I would have preferred in a, such a professional building, but, a lot of people like it. There's a lot of history to it. It's huge. It's 21 feet high by 41 and a half feet wide, and it's painted by this guy named Eugene Francis Savage. And surprisingly, whether you believe it or not, he was born in 1883, so he painted this in 1961, passed away at 78. So this is towards the end of his life. But he was born in Covington, Indiana, originally an Indiana guy, but he went to Yale. He originally went to the Chicago Art Institute, studied art and architecture at Yale, and he also won the Rome Prize in painting, which enabled him to study at the American Academy in Rome. So all these influences on him throughout his career of all this European art and whatnot, and a lot of his paintings, they're kind of some of the same thing. Typically, a bunch of people. There's always meanings behind everybody in the painting. Lots of different actions going on. Lots of color. But he's most famous for his works on the Bailey Fountain in the Grand Army Plaza in Brooklyn, New York, and the Alma Mater mural featured in the Sterling Memorial Library on the campus of Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. Those are his most famous works, but besides the painting he painted for the Indiana Statehouse, he also painted a painting up at Purdue University, which I'll be going in the fall. It's a very similar painting, but it's in Stewart Center. So if you're ever at Purdue University, go to Stewart Center. You'll walk right in, and it's right there. Huge painting, similar design, also painted in the 60s. Lots of color, lots of people in the painting, lots of work going on, lots of meaning as well. I could talk about the spirit of Indiana all day, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of famous artists from Indiana, and Eugene Savage is just one of them. So that was kind of cool. I have a great appreciation for artists. My cousin is an artist, a very excellent painter, drawer, sketcher. And to me, people who have talent like that really deserve to be recognized. And I think that with this whole emphasis on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, we've kind of lost those people. A lot of these people that would have been great artists are now shifted into being designers or engineers or mathematicians, which really, when you look back at history, with the exception of the people who founded mathematics and made mathematics what it is today, a lot of the people that we remember were artists, were explorers, were people applied their skills and their talents to make a difference. I mean, even Galileo, he did a lot with science, but had a lot of good artistic talent. Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, a lot of these great artists out there. So we have all of these iconic paintings like the Mona Lisa. You remember people like Van Gogh. These are the people that are historic. So unless you're going to come up with something groundbreaking in math, I don't think you're going to become a historic math person. Now, I agree society can never have enough engineers because we're always need to improve things and go into the 21st century. But I don't think that we should paint it like you're only going to be successful if you pursue these career fields. I feel like all the arts should be weighted equally because I feel like, as much as we need these people to push us into the space into the 21st century, we need artists. Who's gonna design the spaceship? Obviously, it's got to have its aerodynamics right, but where's the artistic value of it? What's gonna make it unique? What's gonna create culture? After we've colonized space, how are aliens or how are future humans gonna decide what was Earth culture? It's the art, it's the music, it's the creativity. It's the people that chose to be able to work with their hands. Now, obviously, in the future, we're going to kind of have this debate going on, and some famous people online have kind of talked about it already, is handmade versus mind-made. And I don't want to get that into this podcast episode, but I'll give you the gist of it. Is that handmade is the the hand carved, made the coffee table with all the tools and all that crap, whereas mind-made is like 3D printing. So you design it on a program on your computer, you print it out, or even a CNC machine. You design it on a computer, the CNC machine cuts it out. And so I think those are completely different sects, and you can't really associate them together, but that's another debate for another episode. So I'm going to finish things there. Thanks for listening. This episode is going to be a little longer. I'm going to test just to see how the longer episode works out. I think it's actually harder to do a shorter podcast episode, but I haven't had any comment. The only feedback I've gotten is that people wouldn't mind the longer podcast, so I'm going to experiment with going just a little bit longer, but I'll probably go back to the shorter So I'm going to try to just this one episode make it a little longer. Please give me your feedback. Tell me what you think. Whether you like the longer episode, because I know there's people who do podcasts that are 2 hours, hour and a half. So I like the half an hour format because I like to be unique. But give me some feedback. Tell me what you think. In the outro of this podcast, I want to feature an artist who has released their music into the public domain. Artists who release their music into the public domain, I feel like, understand what art is and how it contributes to the world around it. So I'm going to end episode number 7 of the Breece Creator Podcast with Daybreak by Electric Mantis. Check out the show notes on the website to learn more about this song and the content in this episode at breecewoodworking.wixsite.com/creatorpodcast. You can tweet at us on Twitter or follow us on Instagram. I'm Lee Breece. I'll see you next time on the Breece Creator Podcast.